47 pilots. 58 years. All reported the same thing before disappearing from radar. The Pentagon sealed the files within 72 hours. Why? The answer reveals America's darkest military secret. The first vanishing November, 1967. Captain Michael Reeves was 3 hours into a routine reconnaissance flight over the Cambodian border when his voice crackled through the radio at Da Nang Air Base. "Control, this is Eagle 7. I've got..." Jesus Christ. What is that thing? The transmission quality was perfect, crystal clear, no static. What did the radar operators hear next? 37 seconds of Reeves describing an object that moved like nothing on Earth, followed by silence that would last forever. His F-4 Phantom disappeared from radar at 14:47 hours. Did they find the wreckage? Not a single piece. Did they find Captain Reeves? The jungle kept its secrets, but the control tower recordings did not, and what those recordings contained would haunt the Pentagon for the next 6 decades. Lieutenant Sarah Chen was on duty that day. She logged Reeves' final transmission word for word. "It's spherical, maybe 40 feet across, rotating but not like a rotor, more like it's folding into itself. The surface is reflecting things that aren't there. Control, I'm seeing my own aircraft in the reflection, but it's upside down, and wait, there are 2 of me now. How is there 2 of..." Then nothing. What happened to Lieutenant Chen? She was reassigned to Alaska within the week, her security clearance upgraded to Q level, her lips sealed by an oath that carried a penalty of treason. The pattern emerges, but Reeves wasn't the first. Was he even the 10th? Classified documents from 1952 show that Captain James Hartford reported a silver sphere that seemed to bend the sky around it before his F-86 Sabre went down over the Nevada test range. The official report called it pilot error. The unofficial report, the one locked in a safe at Nellis Air Force Base, called it something else entirely. Between 1952 and 1967, 11 pilots vanished under similar circumstances. What did they all see? Every single one described a spherical object. Every single one mentioned distortions in the air. Every single one reported seeing impossible reflections before their final transmission. The Air Force couldn't ignore it anymore. Why? Because in 1968 alone, 7 more pilots disappeared after identical encounters. The pattern was undeniable, and worse, it was accelerating. Colonel David Martinez headed the secret investigation team. What did he discover? Martinez's classified memo from April 1969 laid it out in chilling detail. The phenomenon exhibits consistent behavior across all encounters. Spherical manifestation, approximate diameter 35 to 45 feet, surface properties inconsistent with known materials. All pilots report temporal spatial distortions in the immediate vicinity. Recommendation: establish exclusion protocols immediately. Did the Pentagon listen? They did more than listen. They created Project Dark Sky, a black-budget operation that would eventually consume over $2 billion and the lives of countless pilots who were told they were protecting their country. The common thread: Dr. Eleanor Vasquez joined Dark Sky in 1970 as a physicist specializing in experimental propulsion. What was her job? She was supposed to explain the unexplainable, to find a rational answer for what these pilots were encountering. She spent 3 years analyzing every scrap of data. What did she find? The recordings all contained the same acoustic anomaly, a low-frequency hum at exactly 27.3 Hz that shouldn't exist at altitude. The radar returns showed objects that appeared and disappeared in patterns that suggested they weren't moving through space in any conventional sense. "They're not traveling," Vasquez wrote in her classified report. "They're appearing. There's a difference that our physics can barely conceptualize." But the most disturbing discovery? The reflections the pilots reported weren't random. They showed the pilots' aircraft in impossible positions, inverted, duplicated, sometimes showing damage that hadn't occurred yet. What did that mean? 3 pilots who reported seeing their aircraft on fire in the sphere's reflection died in crashes within 6 months. Their planes caught fire under mysterious circumstances. Captain Thomas Braddock was one of them. In February 1971, he radioed, "I see myself in that thing, and my Phantom's burning. Both engines are gone, and his voice caught. "I'm not in the cockpit anymore." For months later, Braddock's F-4 suffered catastrophic engine failure over the Pacific. Both engines failed simultaneously, a statistical impossibility. Did he eject? The canopy never opened. When they recovered the aircraft from shallow waters, the cockpit was empty. His harness was still buckled. Where did Thomas Braddock go? Nobody has ever found him. The Pentagon's choice by 1973. The disappeared numbered 27. What did the Pentagon do? They faced an impossible choice: acknowledge that something beyond human understanding was plucking pilots from the sky, or maintain the cover-up and hope it would stop. They chose option 3, weaponize it. General Marcus Webb took control of Dark Sky in January 1974. What was his background? Webb had overseen psychological operations in Vietnam and experimental weapons development at DARPA. He didn't want to understand the spheres. He wanted to control them. If we can't explain it, we own it, Webb declared in a meeting that only 7 people attended. And if we can't own it, we make damn sure nobody else does either. Dark Sky's mission changed overnight. Instead of investigating disappearances, they began engineering encounters. How? By sending pilots directly into known manifestation zones with experimental equipment designed to interact with the phenomenon. Did it work? Depends on your definition of work. Between 1974 and 1982, 18 more pilots vanished. But 3 came back. What did they report? Stories so disturbing that Webb immediately classified their debriefs at apex level, higher than top secret, higher than Q clearance, accessible only to the president and 4 others. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park was the first returnee. She'd been missing for 6 days when she walked out of the Nevada desert. Her flight suit pristine, her aircraft nowhere to be found. Where had she been? Somewhere that wasn't, she kept repeating. Somewhere that couldn't be but was. I saw things that haven't happened yet. I saw things that can never happen. I saw myself die 1,000 different ways. Park was institutionalized within hours. Does she remain confined? The last verified sighting placed her at a private facility in Virginia in 1998. Still repeating the same phrases, still drawing the same symbol over and over, a sphere within a sphere, rotating in impossible directions. The leak, the truth, should have stayed buried forever. What changed? In 1987, a maintenance worker at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base found a file box that had been mislabeled and forgotten. Inside were Lieutenant Chen's original transcripts from 1967, along with mission recordings that were supposed to have been destroyed. The worker, Dennis Calloway, did what any curious person might do. He listened to them. What did he hear? 47 different voices, spanning 3 decades, all describing the same impossible thing before falling silent forever. Calloway copied everything. Did he go to the press? He tried. The Washington Post declined. The New York Times passed. CNN laughed him out of their offices. Why? Because the story was too crazy, too unbelievable, too much like science fiction. But Calloway was persistent. He sent copies to 17 different researchers, journalists, and conspiracy theorists. What happened next? 16 of them ignored him. The 17th was Dr. Robert Heinemann, a retired NASA physicist with impeccable credentials and nothing left to lose. Heinemann analyzed the recordings with modern equipment. What did he discover? The acoustic anomaly Vasquez had noted decades earlier wasn't just a hum. It was a signal, a mathematical pattern encoded in sound that repeated every 1,877 seconds, prime numbers embedded in a frequency that shouldn't propagate in atmosphere. Someone or something is broadcasting, Heinemann concluded. And our pilots are the ones picking up the phone. Heinemann prepared to publish his findings in 1989. Did his paper ever see print? He died of a sudden heart attack 3 days before submission. He was 42 years old, a marathon runner with no history of cardiac issues. The coroner's report cited natural causes. Calloway's copies of the recordings? They vanished from Heinemann's office before his body was cold. The families crusade, but some secrets refused to die. The families of the missing pilots had formed a quiet support group in 1975, meeting in church basements and suburban living rooms, sharing their grief and their suspicions. What did the military tell them? Training accidents, equipment failures, pilot error. Human remains unrecoverable due to hostile territory or deep water. Margaret Reeves, Captain Michael's widow, never believed it. How could she? Her husband was one of the finest pilots in the Air Force, flying in clear weather over documented terrain. What really haunted her? The last letter he'd sent home, dated 3 days before he vanished. Something strange is happening out here, Michael had written. Guys are seeing things on patrol, objects that move wrong. Pilots are scared, Maggie. Really scared. But we can't talk about it because the brass shuts us down every time. If anything happens to me, if I don't come home, you need to know it won't be an accident. Tell Tommy his dad loved him. Tell him the truth someday. Margaret kept that letter for 20 years. In 1987, when Calloway's leaked documents began circulating in underground newsletters and early internet forums, she recognized her husband's call sign, Eagle 7. What did she do? She organized the families. 43 families joined her crusade. They filed Freedom of Information requests. They petitioned Congress. They demanded answers. What did they get? Redacted documents, bureaucratic runarounds, and visits from stern men in dark suits who suggested it would be patriotic to let sleeping dogs lie. Did Margaret Reeves back down? She held a press conference on the steps of the Capitol in 1992, surrounded by families holding photographs of their missing loved ones. 47 Americans, she declared, have disappeared while serving their country. The Pentagon knows why. The Pentagon knows how. And the Pentagon is lying to us all. The story made local news. Did it make national headlines? Not even close. Why? Because that same week, a White House scandal dominated every network. Margaret's press conference was buried on page 16 of the Metro section. Forgotten by morning. The search operations that weren't, but here's what the families never knew. There were search operations. Massive, classified, extraordinarily expensive search operations. Why were they called off? Because the search teams started disappearing too. In 1976, a Special Forces unit was dispatched to Cambodia to investigate the zone where Captain Reeves had vanished. What was their mission? Officially, a training exercise. Unofficially, Dark Sky wanted boots on the ground in the manifestation area. The 12-man team inserted via helicopter at dawn. What did they find? At 9:47 local time, the team leader radioed, "We've located something. Structure? Object? Can't tell from here. It's rotating. Jesus, it's rotating in 4 directions at once. How is that possible?" That was the last transmission. What happened to the search team? Satellite imagery from later that day showed their equipment scattered across a 3-mile radius, as if they'd simply dropped everything and walked away. No bodies, no blood, no sign of struggle, just emptiness. And in the center of their abandoned campsite, a perfect circle of scorched earth, 42 feet in diameter, the soil fused into glass. The Pentagon called off ground searches after that. But they didn't stop investigating. Why? Because the disappearances were accelerating. By 1985, the count had reached 39. By 1995, 44. By 2010, 47, the number that holds even today. What happened in 2010? The last confirmed disappearance. Captain Jennifer Liu, flying an F-22 Raptor on a classified mission over the Pacific. Her final transmission, "I see it. The sphere is here. It's..." Then silence. They recovered her aircraft 3 days later, floating intact in the Philippine Sea. The canopy was sealed. The systems were still running. The ejection seat had never been triggered. But Captain Liu? Gone. As if she'd simply ceased to exist between one heartbeat and the next. The files get sealed. Why did the Pentagon seal all Dark Sky files in 2013? What triggered the total lockdown? The truth is more unsettling than any conspiracy theory. A whistleblower inside Dark Sky, identity still unknown, leaked a single photograph to a private investigator working for the families. What did it show? The interior of Hangar 18 at Wright-Patterson, dated December 2012. In the center of the hangar sat a perfect sphere, 40 feet in diameter, suspended 3 feet off the ground with no visible means of support. Its surface showed reflections of things that weren't in the room, aircraft that had been scrapped decades ago, people who had been dead for years, landscapes that existed nowhere on Earth. And standing around the sphere, frozen in various poses of approach, 47 figures in flight suits, perfectly preserved, not moving, not breathing, just there, caught mid-step, reaching toward the sphere, their expressions mixing wonder and terror. The photograph was authenticated by 3 independent experts before it hit the internet. How long did it circulate? 17 hours. Then it vanished from every server, every backup, every cached page. The investigator who released it, found dead in his home, another heart attack, another autopsy that found nothing unusual. But the Pentagon had seen enough. Within 72 hours, every Dark Sky file was sealed under National Security Directive 771C. The clearance level required to access them? It doesn't officially exist. The number of people authorized? Less than 10 worldwide. General Webb himself reportedly ordered the lockdown. What did he say in the classified briefing? According to one source who was present, "We opened a door we can't close. We made contact with something that doesn't operate by our rules. And worst of all, they're learning. The spheres appear more frequently now. They stay longer. They're becoming more deliberate." What the families were told versus reality. Margaret Reeves received an official letter in 2015. What did it say? The Department of Defense regretted to inform her that Captain Michael Reeves' remains had been positively identified through DNA analysis of recovered material from a crash site in Laos. Would she like them sent home for burial? She would. What did she bury? A sealed casket that military honor guards warned her must never be opened, for reasons of biological contamination from the recovery site. Did she comply? For 2 years, yes. But in 2017, Margaret Reeves was dying of cancer. She had nothing left to lose. What did she do? She had the casket exhumed and opened, with her lawyer and a forensic pathologist present. What was inside? A flight suit, perfectly preserved, as if it had been worn yesterday. No human remains. No DNA. No Michael. Just his uniform, arranged carefully around something else. Something that shouldn't exist. A piece of the sphere. 6 inches across, impossibly smooth, reflecting things that weren't there. The pathologist tried to touch it. What happened? His hand passed through it as if it were made of light, but he screamed and pulled back, his palm blistering with cold burns that took months to heal. It's not matter, the pathologist reported. It's not antimatter. It's not plasma or energy. It's something else. Something our physics has no category for. Margaret tried to go public. Did anyone listen? She died 3 weeks after the exhumation. The official cause? Complications from her cancer. The unofficial cause? The fragment disappeared from her lawyer's safe the night before she planned to show it to the media. 23 other families received similar letters between 2015 and 2020. Remains identified. Caskets sealed. Biological hazards cited. How many families opened them? Only 3 confirmed. What did they all find? Flight suits. Fragments. Nothing human. The military was returning equipment, not people. Why? Because the people weren't dead. They were somewhere else. Somewhere the Pentagon couldn't or wouldn't explain. The hidden continuation, but here's what the public doesn't know. Dark sky never ended. How do we know? Budget analysis. Black budget appropriations to a program codenamed Celestial Harbor began appearing in classified congressional briefings in 2014. The amounts? Staggering. $3 billion in 2018 alone. What is Celestial Harbor? Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's dark sky under a new name, with a new mission. Not to study the spheres, but to create them. A defense contractor whistleblower, speaking anonymously, claimed in 2019 that a facility in Nevada had successfully replicated the spatial anomaly effect in laboratory conditions. What does that mean? They built their own sphere. Did it work? According to the whistleblower, yes. And then it took 3 people. Just pulled them in. We shut down the experiment, but the sphere didn't shut down with it. It stayed for 6 hours, floating there, showing us reflections of ourselves in places we'd never been, doing things we'd never done. Then it vanished, and so did the 3 researchers. We never found them. The program continued anyway. Why? Because the military applications are too tempting. Imagine a weapon that could make entire battalions disappear. Imagine a transportation system that could move soldiers across impossible distances. Imagine the strategic advantage. Imagine the horror of getting it wrong. The truth that can't be spoken. So what really happened to those 47 pilots? The truth, the real truth, exists in a file that sits in a vault beneath Fort Meade, Maryland. Only 7 people have ever read it. What does it say? According to a source who claims to have seen it, the spheres are not weapons. They're not alien spacecraft. They're not secret experiments. They're holes. Punctures in the fabric of reality itself, created by something on the other side that's trying to get through. Every pilot who disappeared didn't die. They went through. Where? To a place that exists adjacent to our reality. A space between spaces where the laws of physics are more like suggestions. A place where time runs differently, where causality loops back on itself, where a single person can exist in multiple states simultaneously. Why can't they come back? Because once you've passed through, you're part of that space. You become quantum, superpositioned, existing in all possible states at once. The reflections the pilots saw before disappearing. They weren't predictions. They were other versions of themselves, bleeding through from adjacent realities. The 47 pilots are still alive. All of them, every version of them, simultaneously dead and alive here and elsewhere, existing in a state that human consciousness wasn't designed to handle. The Pentagon knows this. Why don't they tell anyone? Because the implications are too vast, too terrifying. If the spheres are holes, what made them? If they're getting bigger and more frequent, what does that mean? If the pilots went through, what might come through from the other direction? The question we should be asking 47 pilots. 58 years. But here's what nobody talks about. The disappearances haven't stopped. They've just gotten quieter, better hidden, more efficiently covered up. How many pilots have vanished in the last decade? The families don't know. The public doesn't know. Congress doesn't know. But someone knows. Someone is counting. Someone at the Pentagon is watching those numbers climb and making calculations about when, not if, the situation becomes uncontainable. Margaret Reeves spent her final days writing a memoir that her lawyer was instructed to publish only after her death. Did he publish it? The manuscript vanished from his office. Margaret's backup copies? Gone. Her computer files? Wiped clean. But here's the thing about truth. It's persistent. Margaret had made one more copy, hidden in a place nobody thought to look. Where? Her late husband's old flight manual, pages hollowed out, USB drive sealed inside, sitting in a box in her grandson Tommy's attic. Tommy Reeves is 36 now. He doesn't know what his grandmother left him. Not yet, but someday, maybe soon, he'll find that hollowed-out manual. He'll plug in that drive. He'll read his grandfather's final transmission, hear his voice describing the impossible sphere, and he'll understand that everything the government told his family was a lie. What will he do then? The same thing his grandmother did. The same thing 43 other families have tried to do. He'll demand answers. He'll seek truth. Will he get it? The Pentagon has had 58 years to perfect the art of silence. They've had 58 years to refine their techniques of suppression, intimidation, and misdirection. But they've also had 58 years to watch the spheres multiply, to track their appearances increasing exponentially, to realize that whatever created them is getting closer, becoming more present, more insistent. The files are sealed. The truth is hidden. The pilots are gone. But the spheres? They're still out there, still appearing, still showing impossible reflections, still waiting. And sooner or later, what happened to those 47 pilots will happen to someone who can't be silenced. Someone with resources, connections, or just enough reckless courage to force the truth into the light. When that day comes, America and the world will have to confront the darkest secret the Pentagon has ever kept. That reality itself is far more fragile than we ever imagined, and we've been ignoring the cracks for almost 6 decades. 47 pilots went through those cracks. How many more will follow before we admit they exist? The answer, locked in that vault beneath Fort Meade, is simple and terrifying. All of us, eventually. The spheres aren't stopping. They're spreading. And the Pentagon knows exactly what's coming. They just pray it doesn't arrive on their watch. The names in the story have been changed. The dates are real. The pattern exists. Whether you believe it or not doesn't change what's happening in the skies above you right now. Look up.